There's a reason flash storage isn't called electronic non-volatile memory storage. IBM Flash Storage is fast, cloud-ready, scalable and surprisingly affordable. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Hi, I'm Jane McCallion.
And I'm Adam Shepherd.
Welcome to the ITPro Podcast, your weekly guide to the most important topics in the IT industry.
So, Jane, what have you been up to this week?
I haven't been doing an awful lot, but I have been catching up on some of my gaming. So I've been playing Death Stranding, which is a luxury game in which there are actually deliveries to everybody. And
it's funny that seems like a utopian ideal now.
It's an outrageous idea. Post-apocalyptic with deliveries. I've also caught up on the finale of Westworld last night, season 3. That was.
I've been meaning to get into that.
You have to watch it from the very beginning of season 1 because it's constantly calling back to other episodes.
I've watched season 1 and season 2 and loved them both. Slightly unsurprising as an IT nerd, given that it's all themes of artificial intelligence and humanity's place in the development of it and all of those kind of broad metaphysical themes. But I was going to say
it's more philosophy than anything else. But yes, season 3 is excellent. I very much enjoyed the season finale. Check out my Twitter for further further takes on the finale of Westworld.
I've also been catching up on a bit of TV and a bit of gaming. I've gotten back into Medieval 2 Total War recently, which is an RTS game which, when it originally came out in, I think, circa 2005 or so, I didn't really have powerful enough PC hardware to run, but I do now. I've been getting stuck into it recently and grappling with the recalcitrant French. I've also been watching Gangs of London on Now TV, which, if you haven't checked out, I highly recommend. The first episode is really kind of gripping prestige drama stuff.
Once again, kind of a vision of an extraordinary landscape in which there are people outside.
Yeah, quite. It's a nice bit of escapism at the moment. Anyway, TV and games aside, we should probably get into the subject of this week's episode.
Later on in the episode, we'll be talking about mental health in the IT industry and the impact of always-on culture. But first, let's talk about this week's top news stories.
So first up this week, the coronavirus crisis has had as much of an impact on the way big tech firms work as it has anywhere else. There's been a sudden shift to what's being called distributed working or the distributed office. And this week, Twitter has said that its employees can now work from home indefinitely.
Yes, with very few exceptions. They can come back as soon as they want once the company's offices open, or indeed work from home forever, it seems. Twitter's VP of People, Jennifer Christie, said that while the company was one of the first to go for a work from home model once COVID-19 became a problem, they do not anticipate being one of the first to return to the offices, and the opening offices will be Twitter's decision, but when and if their employees come back will be theirs.
Facebook and Google, meanwhile, have taken a slightly more restrictive tack. They're allowing employees to continue working from home for the rest of the year, although offices are expected to reopen in July. But they haven't gone as far as to say that remote working will now be fully permitted indefinitely for all staff.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what actually happens. Twitter has obviously seen which way the wind is blowing and decided to embrace the working from home culture that is really taking hold. And I think most organisations really are going to offer more remote working, even if it's not necessarily on a permanent basis or whatever. There are going to be some roles that require you to come into the office at least some of the time.
But the thing is, those roles are few and far between now. Like, unless you need physical access to something, then there is, practically speaking, very little reason why you can't do your job entirely remotely should you so wish. And all of the kind of principal objections that companies had to this on the grounds of, not having the tools in place, they're kind of gone now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for some of the sort of sales and marketing mix side of things. There is something about being there in person to do a brainstorm, or to buying and selling is, especially when there's a lot of money on the table. I think a lot of people do prefer to do it in person. We're social animals, and a video conference can't replace that. That said, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that Facebook and Google are kind of possibly going to go for the presenteeism type thing, given that they're tech companies, both of which have gone in both feet for facilitating the whole working from home thing. Especially Facebook, it's been a hard pivot to try and cash in on the video conferencing.
I was going to say both companies have, built substantial enterprise businesses on allowing and supporting, remote workers through tools like Workplace and G Suite. It seems slightly baffling that working remotely 100% of the time isn't already a perfectly established norm within those companies in particular. It seems mad that that Twitter has beaten them to the punch.
Perhaps they just don't feel like eating their own dog food.
And next up this week, a law firm with a star-studded client list has found itself falling victim to a ransomware attack, leading to the exfiltration of some of said star's most sensitive information, allegedly.
Yes, the snappily named Grudman, Shire, Mycellus and Sachs law firm has apparently had 756 gigabytes of data taken, although that is not confirmed. It's stuff like contracts, personal emails. I believe that Lady Gaga and Madonna are both clients. So
I think Bruce Springsteen as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always one of these things with this kind of thing. It's like, how salacious is a bunch of emails between these people and their law firm really going to be? I mean, there could be some serious dirt in there, but at the same time, I bet a lot of it is just kind of the kind of thing that you would read in the kind of sidebar of shame and that kind of thing anyway.
Well, you would be surprised.
Would I?
Yes. You would be surprised. Anyone who is a regular reader of the Pop Bitch newsletter, which I highly recommend for fans of salacious gossip, will know that law firms and the like are frequently privy to stuff that does not make it onto the sidebar of shame for various reasons. But even beyond that, we've had examples of what happens with this kind of situation with the Sony Pictures hack from a couple of years ago, when the emails between various movie stars and Sony Pictures executives and staff were hacked and then leaked online by the Lazarus Group. And that included a lot of what turned out to be quite damaging information, particularly as it relates to stuff like payments and contracts. It led to a number of kind of high-profile scandals where female actors in particular were being paid markedly less than their male co-stars.
Do you know what that's exactly as you were saying that? I just thought, is this going to throw up like the contracts women in general overall are under is going to be paying them less than their male counterparts, or indeed that they're being fleeced completely, which does sometimes happen to young female stars in particular. I
would not remotely be surprised.
Yes. Another little interesting tidbit is that the ransomware being used is R-Evil or Revil. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that. I don't know that the hackers care. Also known as Sodino Kibi. The Japanese word for millet.
Well done for attempting that.
Japanese word for millet, because I'm that kind of nerd as well. And that is the kind of ransomware that hit Travelex earlier this year.
It should be noted that this is a variant that is being sold for ransomware as a service attacks. So there is no concrete indication that the group behind this latest attack is also the same group that was behind Travelex.
Yeah, it would be quite a change in motivation as well.
It'll be interesting to see how the law firm responds to this. I mean, the advice in these situations is always not to pay the ransom, but on the other hand, there is a lot of potentially sensitive information, and for a law firm in particular, this is the kind of thing where you do not want the reputational damage that could come as a result of this information making it into the public sphere.
Yeah, it's very much a kind of how quickly do you want to get it to go away, and how much of a risk are you going to take that they're not bluffing.
The thing is, of course, there's no guarantee that even if they pay, that the information won't be leaked anyway.
Yes, there never is. Don't do deals with criminals.
Now, moving on from criminals to something completely different, the UK House of Commons.
So the lower house of Parliament has got rid of Zoom and is also moving to e-voting. Security concerns about Zoom are apparently what have prompted the House of Commons to investigate an alternative to the explosively popular video conferencing service that's really taken off during the COVID crisis. Apparently they're currently trialling Starleaf, which is a Watford-based company, according to the Telegraph. As much, this is possibly kind of an embrace of British business thing, which is, a big drive at the moment. And also, it's good to investigate and support homegrown industry. However, it won't bring it into line with the House of Lords, because that is using Microsoft Teams and continues to do so.
The Parliament has a bit of a spotty relationship with technology, now more so than ever. The recently launched e-voting system, which is being trialled to allow members to vote on motions and in debates while still maintaining proper social distancing, was trialled this week and has been met with a mixed reception, I think it's fair to say. A lot of members do not like it at all.
Yeah, so the motion to use it passed by 115 votes, which is not it's a decent majority, but not a roaring majority at all. And apparently it could be abandoned as early as next week because the government wants MPs to return to physical ways of working as soon as possible. Now, if you've ever seen photos of, the packed Commons when everyone is there for a key vote, but let's just say it's going to take a long time to do some voting, given that everybody has to go through doors in a socially distanced way and stand in a socially distanced way. I think they might need to add an annex or something.
Well, yeah, you can only get 50 MPs in the chamber if they're abiding by proper social distancing. It seems madness to dismiss this system effectively out of hand. I know concerns have been raised by one senior Conservative MP in particular that children, spouses and staff could be using the system to fraudulently vote on MP's behalf, but that doesn't seem like a particularly realistic.
If you can see everybody, surely that kind of, it's unlikely. I think I'd notice if Keir Starmer had suddenly turned into a child or a woman with a totally a dog with a totally different face. I think it seems unreasonable, and I think it's possibly just trying to grasp at something to bring back tradition, because the House of Commons, the Lords and stuff, very, 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 very steeped in tradition. The ways of voting are archaic. The just the way of business in the houses are archaic. And as nice as it is to, go and have Blackrod call everybody to lunch, at the same time, you can't turn backwards from something like this, especially not in a rush if this is a public health crisis, which means MPs too, as demonstrated by Boris Johnson and much of his cabinet.
Well, quite.
We're going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, we will be moving on to a different health crisis, mental health in the IT industry.
See you after the break.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's: speed, retrieve data fast and efficiently; scalability, grow your storage as your business grows; simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price from as little as 1,300 kroner. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Welcome back. Next week marks the start of Mental Health Week, and it brings up a challenging issue in the IT community, which is the subject of mental health and burnout. IT in particular has a bit of a spotty reputation in this area, and it's only been exacerbated by the ongoing lockdowns and quarantines, which has raised anxiety levels across the board, but also means that people are working from home often for the first time ever and are grappling with issues of isolation, with working too long, and just generally a large amount of strain.
Yes, so research carried out by Asana in July 2019 found that 80% of global technology workers have experienced burnout in at least the 6 months prior. And in the UK, that figure rises to 81% of respondents saying they feel burned out once a month or more.
That is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is a worrying amount. And I do wonder, with the tech industry, it's one of those things. I think that to an extent we've embraced, say, neuroatypical people to the extent that it's almost like a bit of a cliche and a stereotype. But same as everywhere else, when it comes to mental health and resiliency, it's just... Well, that second word that I've just said, it's not about resiliency really, is it? But that's still very much the way everyone thinks of it. I have seen around people suggesting that actually this sudden move to remote work and isolation and the troubles that everyone seems to be having on a greater or lesser scale could help make mental health problems less stigmatized, which would be good.
So let's talk about working from home. It's something that most of us have been living with for the last couple of months, and for many of us, it's something that we're going to be living with for the foreseeable future. As we talked about before the break, tech companies are encouraging their staff to work from home for as long as is comfortable for them, and many offices likely won't be reopening until the end of the year. So how can we make sure that working from home isn't going to be damaging in the long run for our mental health and our general well-being?
I think there's probably an element of habituation to it. Personally, I've not found the transition to working from home 5 days a week, every week, forever, particularly hard because I already did 3 days a week from home, for the past year, and have worked a variable amount from home before that. And indeed was self-employed and working from home all the time before that. So I'm an old hand at this. How have you found it? Because you didn't really work from home particularly before.
I've actually found it less of an adjustment than I thought I would. Our team has been working from home off and on for several years now. So the infrastructure that we've got in place to support that in terms of things like Slack and video conferencing and all that kind of stuff has been firmly established way before COVID-19. But there's still been a number of adjustments that I've had to make just in terms of how I approach work. For example, one of the things that I think is really, really important for working from home is having a proper workspace and having all of the stuff that you need to work effectively. And I'm not just talking about, having a laptop and having access to collaboration tools and whatnot. Important though those things absolutely are. I'm talking about things like making sure you've got a decent chair and making sure that, ideally you've got some kind of natural light and that kind of thing, because it's all those little things that go towards making a pleasant and productive working environment that you don't necessarily notice when you're in an office, but will really start to take their toll if you don't have them for extended periods.
Yeah, and I think it's also a case that you have to try and avoid. We're already suffering with always on culture, as it's called. You work from 9 till 5, but you also are checking emails and stuff on your way to and from work, and perhaps in the evening. All that kind of thing. And without the delineation, if you're in London, you don't kind of go into the underground and disappear from your Wi-Fi or whatever. And there's no commute. Everything is just in the same way that time is just. Days are flowing into each other for many people. There's no sense of time if you don't make yourself start at this time, have lunch at this time, and finish whenever. And some people are probably more productive if they want to work on, but that feeling of obligation to be available and to be online, I think, is possibly heightened for some people.
Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to fall into that without realizing as well. Because, for a lot of people, there isn't going to be much delineation between your workspace and your home space. If you're lucky enough to have a home office that you can kind of effectively shut the door on and leave work behind for the day, that's, that will go a long way to helping that. But if your quote unquote workspace is, your dining table or, in my case, a corner of your living room, then it's very easy to just keep kind of dipping in and out of work stuff throughout, the rest of your evening or your weekend, which is not super healthy if you can avoid it. And I think it's really important to have rituals to separate your workday from your free time. So, whether that's, something as simple as I finish work at 6 and then I start making dinner, or I have a glass of wine, or I go for a run, or whatever it might be, or even just as simple as changing clothes.
Yeah, and it can be kind of, it all feeds off itself. Our colleague Bobby Hellard wrote last year about the problem of always on, and there's a quote from somebody who worked at a startup called Sifted, saying that they were getting slacked at midnight, at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you think that if they're working these crazy hours, then they expect that of you, and if you're not replying, then people will think that you're being lazy or you don't care about your job. And in this kind of situation, it's very easy to fall into that trap.
Another issue that's becoming more and more prevalent is what's being termed Zoom fatigue. As we're all trying to stay connected while working remotely, most of our meetings have been replaced by video calls, which is nice and good. I'm, a big advocate of video calls as a way to keep connected, things like virtual pub trips, or the rash of quizzes that everyone seems to have been doing. But I think there's also a danger that we are oversubscribing on video calls, in the same way that not everything needs to be a sit-down face-to-face meeting in normal office life. Not everything needs to be a Zoom call or whatever other video conferencing services are available.
I agree. I think there's an element of overcompensation going on as well, that we're kind of very aware of the fact that we're not going to see each other, so we're going to check in and blah, and that is in our private life and it's in our work life and everything. I ended up on a group chat with friends and family who I wouldn't actually normally see all at the same time and not regularly. And I think there's an element of that as well in work, that we're kind of trying to keep up with each other, but also all these meetings are possibly running one into the other. If you had face-to-face meetings, back to back, say 3 of them at work normally, you'd probably move between places, so you get like a kind of little mental pause between them, rather than it just kind of being this constant influx of information and people's slightly pixelated faces.
Yeah, exactly. And I think video calls, while good, aren't necessarily a replacement for the kind of socialization that you get in an office. And I think where possible, it is important to try and replicate that if you can. So if you have anyone that you live with. Take 5 minutes to make a cup of tea or a coffee and just have a bit of a chat with them, or even just call kind of a co-worker or a friend for 5-10 minutes during the day, just to have a chat that isn't a video conference and B, about work stuff, because otherwise it gets to the point where you wake up and ideally have a shower and get dressed and whatnot. And
getting a sight into your life here. Adam Shepherd recording the ITPro podcast in his pajamas.
I can neither confirm nor deny these allegations. But yeah, you get up, you get ready, and then you start having Zoom calls and whatnot. And for some people, you just don't stop, and that's just it. You're just parked in front of a webcam for 8 hours, and then you log off and go to sleep, which means that you are just constantly, you are always on.
Yeah, and these calls in particular can actually be quite productive. Even if you just call up for a chat, actually you can end up talking about things that you get that kind of bouncing ideas off each other thing that you would get in a meeting someone in the corridor and having a chat, or just going over to see them at their desk, or seeing them in the lift, or all these extraordinary things that are consigned to the dusty past for now. I do think that kind of having a break, put your phone down, turn your laptop off. If you've been staring at a screen all day, maybe go and stir a pot of boiling pasta instead for a bit. Make a cup of tea, look out the window, any of these kinds of things to just make that kind of mental break. And I do think also, there is more of an understanding than there has been previously of the mental impact of isolation and just constant background anxiety as well, because at the end of the day, we are living through a pandemic, a plague, and that there is always the background anxiety that actually you could get very ill, or somebody else could get very ill. So definitely, I would say if you are struggling, talk to your manager, or if they're not very approachable, somebody else, because the likelihood is that they will very much understand, because they are in the same situation. In a lot of these ways, we're all in it together is a horrible cliche, but we kind of are. We're having many of the same experiences.
I think it's fair to say that remote working isn't going anywhere. Kind of now more than ever, this is going to be a much greater part of everyone's lives going forward, not just as a result of pandemics and quarantines, but because, in a lot of cases, it's been proven to be viable. So those that want remote working will now be able to legitimately demand it effectively.
Yeah, which could be a very good mental health benefit, actually.
Well, quite. But the point is that we need to make sure that we are doing remote working in a sustainable way that is going to be able to be supported by the rest of the business and by, technology and by culture more than anything else. So it's super important that we put the work in now to make sure that we're doing remote working in that sustainable way, and that it's something we can go forward with confidence once this pandemic ends.
We'll be leaving some links to articles where we've written about this topic previously, as well as resources that you can reach out to if you are experiencing any mental health difficulties. And you can find even more information about remote working, sustainability, and anything else you'd like to know about at our website, www.itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter at ITPro, as well as LinkedIn and Facebook.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you find podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you can, leave us a review and rating. We'll be back next week with more news and analysis from the world of IT. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of 2,200 kroner for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.